Hello, this is another one of my videos on my essay, Sociological Theories Regarding the Emergence and Development of New Religious Movements, this one being the first of a series on deprivation theories. This is from the long first section on psychological theories. The most well-worked psychological theories of the motivations underlying membership of social and religious movements have been those centering on the concept of deprivation and relative deprivation. Ultimately, and however loosely, these all rely on some variant of Freudian personality theory, whereby the frustration of individual instinctual desires was held to give rise to anxiety and various ego defense mechanisms. Two variant hypotheses underlie these theories. Theorists concerned with explaining collective and political violence have employed the frustration-aggression hypothesis developed by John Dollard and his associates at Yale. Theorists concerned with various aspects of religious behavior have employed a far less specific frustration-compensation hypothesis. The neglected category of collective religious violence would presumably be seen in terms of both of these hypotheses. According to the first hypothesis, aggression was the inevitable psychological consequence of the frustration arising from interference with the attainment of the anticipated goals of a sequence of behavior and the non-availability of alternative means of satisfying these expectations. Subsequent modifications of the hypothesis, in particular by Berkowitz, have both broadened the concept of frustration to include, for example, the disappointment due to the non-fulfillment of expectations, and taken away the element of inevitability, so that overt aggression is regarded as occurring only when there is an available and already recognized target, and when there are no strong individual personality differences involved. More generally, various authors, particularly Bandura, have proposed an alternative social learning theory of aggression, which, whilst not necessarily incompatible with the frustration-aggression hypothesis, points to the importance of factors other than frustration occasioning violence. The second hypothesis assumes that in the absence of practical means of responding to frustration and deprivation, human beings would seek means of psychological compensation. Strong inhibition of the frustration-aggression response might be regarded as one such source of the need for compensation. Traditionally, religion has been seen as the most important of these means of compensation. Alternative means would include the use of alcohol and drugs. Unlike the frustration-aggression hypothesis, which has been subject to considerable testing and modification by psychologists, the frustration-compensation hypothesis remains largely untested and unchanged. As such, it has generally been used in a way that negates the possibility of positive motivation, religious action and belief being treated as little more than a blind response to deprivation. If, as was traditionally the case, frustration is understood as meaning material deprivation, then neither of these hypotheses accord with such evidence as is available regarding the actual membership of social movements, whether revolutionary or religious. Thus, peasant protest movements are dominated by the better-off peasants. Revolutionary movements do not make their primary appeal to the very poor. Religious activity in modern societies is most concentrated amongst the middle classes. New religious movements emerge amongst both deprived and relatively privileged social strata, and some sects traditionally regarded as making particular appeal to the poor and disprivileged are found on investigation to have a socially more advantaged membership. As Trotsky argued, the mere existence of privations is not enough to cause an insurrection. If it were, the masses would always be in revolt. Those who desired to save deprivation as an explanatory concept in the face of this disconfirmatory evidence have had recourse to two often interrelated strategies. One, to examine deprivation in terms of the actor's own perceptions of it relative to some external standard, and two, to greatly extend the kinds of deprivation considered. Relative deprivation. The concept of relative deprivation refers to the common sense notion that people feel deprived of some desired state or object in terms of comparison, either with the real or imagined conditions of other people, or with the conditions which they themselves have previously enjoyed or currently aspire to. Such a notion is explicit in the writings of several early social theorists, but was first given systematic discussion by Merton and Kipp in 1950. Linking the concept to reference group theory, they argued that the fundamental situation described by it was not the presence or absence of actual deprivation, but rather the specific fact that self-appraisals were made relative to a social frame of reference. That is, that an individual's appraisals of his or her own social and psychological experience was made in comparison with that of others, by which standard he or she might feel relatively deprived or relatively satisfied. By contrast, Gurr placed the emphasis on a different sort of relativity, namely the actor's own perception of discrepancy between the goods and conditions of life to which they believed that they were justifiably entitled, their value expectations, and the conditions of their social and physical environment, which determined their perceived chances of getting these goods and conditions of life, their value capabilities. In either case, such comparisons only become socially significant when the socially structured contexts in which they occurred were common to numbers of individuals within a particular group. As Merton himself recognized, the term group in this context was something of a misnomer, in that socially significant comparative reference could include not only groups of socially interacting persons, but also wider social collectivities and categories, such as social classes or occupational and ethnic groupings. Again, as Shubhatani pointed out, groups could vary in composition, size, territorial distribution, the extent and clarity of their boundaries, and the sense of solidarity and identification felt by their members. The reference group, in fact, was an audience consisting of real or imaginary personifications to whom certain values are imputed, and before whom a person tries to maintain or enhance his standing. It was that group whose presumed perspective is used by an actor as the frame of reference in the organization of his perceptual field. The relationship of the individual to such complex reference might itself be complex. It was possible for the group to be regarded as a positive or negative referent, for the individual to be simultaneously a member of several different groups, and for there to be distinctions between the group or groups to which one actually belonged and those which provided normative standards and the comparative framework of evaluation of self and others. This all sounds credible. If deprivation is to be regarded as an explanatory variable within the context of a social psychological approach to social movements, then it would seem necessary for it to be related to actual psychological states and not merely the objective conditions projected to give rise to such states. The evidence already cited suggests that of itself, material deprivation is neither a necessary nor a sufficient condition for the rise of social and religious movements. It therefore seems reasonable to suppose that human perceptions of actual or anticipated deprivations may well be the mediating variable which causes individuals to initiate and join social movements. After all, material conditions may be variously perceived. Those who suffer from actual material deprivation need not necessarily regard their condition as unreasonable. Generations of suffering may have encouraged a fatalistic acceptance of the status quo. The poor, as de Tocqueville suggested, may have become so accustomed to their poverty that they despair of getting physical comfort, and in any case may not know enough about such comfort to want it. Then again, those who are relatively more advantaged in absolute terms may have a clearer perception of their own deprivations, and thus a stronger sense of grievance. So, I'm going to pause there. Thank you very much if you've been listening so far, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement, without whom I wouldn't be able to make these videos. You're very welcome to join them, of course. If you want to support my channel, you're very welcome to do so. Please do like, comment and share on the videos. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give Patreon and for the moment PayPal links below if you want to provide practical support. Next week we'll talk about, we'll continue talking about deprivation theories, so deprivation theories 2. My apologies for any background noise. Bangkok traffic seems particularly noisy today. And also my apologies if you've been eager to look up the references in this video. At the moment all my books are in storage, and that includes the bibliography for this essay, so I'm afraid I can't put those up at the moment, but when conditions change I'll put them under the video. Anyway, have a good day.